Hi Textile Buddies, I'm Daria, textile and surface pattern designer, educator and painter. On this channel we talk all things textile pattern, color, artwork and creativity. In today's video I want to talk about burnout and specifically creative burnout. Although I am no stranger to creative block and burnout, I face a crisis approximately once a month or so, and I call it the black hole. Recently, I hit the burnout of burnouts, you guys. It was something really scary. I am still battling my way through it, to be honest. And I decided to make this video where I gather all the things that helped, things that didn't, and generally my thoughts. And if you are facing this feeling as well, I want you to know that it's natural to burn out from time to time. As I heard in another video, if you burn bright, you will burn out at some point. So if you do something you deeply care about, there probably will come a time when you run out of steam. Hopefully temporarily. I don't want to go into lengthy definitions, but I want to say that even though creative block and burnout go hand in hand and have a lot in common, I understand creative block as when you have the desire to create and maybe even too many ideas and you are just spinning your wheels for some reason, while a creative burnout is when you can't touch your art materials, you are no longer creating and don't know how to start, even though you might be longing to. So I want to share with you 20 tools that might help with creative burnout. There will be 17 main tips and 3 bonus tips that annoy me as they sound so tacky and boring. You will hear them in every single video about burnout, but they actually work. So let's get started. Number 1 is different psychological tools such as self-reflection and analysis. This is not the first and foremost tool, just a helpful one if you enjoy self-reflection, psychology, and digging deep. I do it for any problems in my life, and it often replaces working with a therapist for me. So if you can't afford therapy or maybe just don't want to work with a psychotherapist at the moment, all you need is a journal, a sound recording app on your phone, and 2 pens of different colors. You also need your imagination and flexibility of thinking, because we will be pulling out your alter ego for help. Let me explain how it works. So just like I said, there are 2 ways to do it. You can either journal your thoughts or you can record them, as an audio. And I use both interchangeably. I used to write really a lot, I used to write diaries ever since I was like 10 years old or so. But sometimes writing is hard on your head, and I do have hand, and arm and shoulder issues. So, okay, let me explain it in good order. You just basically journal, you write down all your thoughts, anything that's on your mind, anything that's bugging you, practicing to express what you're feeling, not shying away from any emotions whatsoever. You can swear if you need to, you can write whatever, is on your mind. And it's necessary and important to be honest, because this is not meant for somebody's eyes, this is not meant to be a literary source, this is just meant as a creative vent, as a vent in general. You just let out whatever is bothering you here and here, you are just spilling your heart out. And then I said you take another pen in a different color and you basically switch on your alter ego and you read what you just wrote. You do need to have a little bit of free time for this, and you read it as if, for example, your friend wrote it, or as if you are a therapist and you are analyzing what the other person wrote without judging, of course, being respectful, being accepting. And for example, you might say something, oh my god, I hate myself so much, I am such a failure, I fail at everything I touch. And then with a different pen, with like your sane voice, you are like, hold on a minute, you are not a failure. Here are very concrete accomplishments that you have. This is what you did, this is a contest that you won, this is a website that you built, you have a library of 10,000 designs, and so on and so forth. So it's never black and white, it's never like you fail at everything. It's logically impossible to fail at absolutely everything. And the other way to do it, which I also like to use, you just basically start a recording app on your phone and you speak your mind out, you say whatever you feel. And again, don't shy away from emotions and different words and just kind of, let it all out. I actually prefer this method because it's faster and, writing down is difficult sometimes, like it's a lot, it's also helpful, because you are engaging certain parts of your brain as you are writing, and it also counts as like motions, therapeutic motions. But sometimes it's good to speak, and it's just faster, like I mentioned, and you can say a lot more things and you can listen to them as well, and you can, jot down ideas, and you will be surprised, I promise. If you're like being completely honest and you are spilling your heart out, you will be surprised to hear certain things. When you hear them, again, you dissociate from those words, you pretend you are a different person, right? You will be like, oh my God, did I really just say, that I don't know, all my designs are worthless. These are just examples. I'm not, giving you what I actually write in those diaries, but there are different sorts of feelings. Again, learning to work with feelings and emotions is very important. I grew up being taught and being conditioned to think that there are bad emotions and good emotions, like anger is bad and sadness is bad, and you are always supposed to be happy, but it's impossible. And there are emotions like sadness or grief. You can't be happy if you are grieving, if you lost somebody, for example. So the idea of this whole thing is to accept what you are feeling, to acknowledge, yes, I'm jealous, for example, of other designers, and what can I do about it? You're basically doing the work that a therapist would do with you. You can also ask yourself questions like, how did I get in this situation? A lot of my diary entries or like my recordings start with the words like, I'm feeling really crappy, like something's really bugging me. And then I try to fumble and find like what exactly is bugging me, and I try to find the exact moment, when I started feeling that way. I go back in my mind, like yesterday in the evening I was feeling great, everything was fine, but where is that moment when I started feeling like crap? And very often it will be a very definite point in time. It will be something like, oh, I saw this Instagram post, of another artist that said this and this and that. Or, for example, I was flipping through magazines and I saw, I don't know, a model that triggered some of my emotions about my appearance and things like that. Or maybe I spoke to a mom at a playground and I started thinking like, I'm a bad mom or something like that. And as humans, we have a lot of different layers of frustration very often. So maybe, your creativity is also influenced by those other things that burden you. And if you unravel what you're feeling, at some point, I wrote down a list of sources of anxiety, and I got 14 sources of anxiety, and I was working with a therapist, and like very briefly was a new person for me. We worked with her only 2 times, and we didn't click, it didn't work out. But I told her like I have 14 sources of anxiety, and she was absolutely shocked. She was like, 14 sources of anxiety? Yes, this is me, this is who I am. But again, if you see that, oh my goodness, there are 14 problems on my mind, of course you are, burned out, of course you're overburdened by all these thoughts and emotions. And then again, when you catch that point, like what triggered your, frustration and burnout, there'll probably be several points. You can start thinking, how can I go back? How can I reverse that? Are there any problems that I can eliminate easily, or maybe not so easily? Sometimes things do take time. How can I take care of it? Because some things will be easily checked off your list, be like, oh, that I don't even have to worry about. But you need to speak to someone about it. And if you don't have anybody, speak to yourself, write it down or record an audio. As you hear the words or as you see the words on paper, they sound completely different. They don't sound like the end of the world in your mind anymore. You could also compare this method to talking to a friend, which you can also do, if you have trustworthy friends. But, nobody knows you like you know yourself. So don't underestimate this method. And I would also encourage you to think about working with a therapist if you can. When I started creating the script for this video, I wasn't in therapy for a very long time, for years, if we don't take those like 2 sessions into account in summer. But now I actually am, as it does help to spill it out. So sometimes it is enough, to talk to yourself. First of all, don't be embarrassed of talking to yourself. That's completely fine. Maybe don't do it in front of other people. But one day my husband heard me, like I couldn't sleep, and I was whispering something to myself, and it shocked him so much. Like he knew that I was struggling emotionally, and that scared him. He was like, are you okay? are you sure you are okay? I think he thought I was going crazy, and I was like, I thought it was normal. I thought like everybody talks to themselves. So tell me, what do you think? I don't talk to myself all the time, of course, but sometimes I do. It also counts as practice. I do record these videos, and being on video and speaking on video takes practice. So speaking to yourself counts as practice as well. So yes, if you can, when you can, I would definitely advise anybody to go through psychotherapy at some point in their lives. I did therapy several times. My first therapist I worked with for 9 months, and that was about 4 or 5 years ago, and we worked on very serious issues at the time. And without that therapy, I wouldn't be myself. I wouldn't be who I am now. It's a confidence boost. It's, working out your old complexes, your childhood traumas and things like that. So, I can't recommend therapy enough. If you can, have a therapist. In the United States, if you have insurance, it is usually covered by insurance. There will be like a very small copay. But, previously I worked with Russian therapists online because I thought, nobody understands my Russian soul. But actually I am now working with an American therapist, and it's a new experience for me as well. Thank God I'm bilingual. So don't be alone. I want to say I do rely on myself pretty much all the time. I have learned to be very independent, but sometimes, you do need other people, and there is no shame in turning to therapy. And another important point, I think I probably mentioned it, is that sometimes you don't find your therapist, like you don't find your doctor at the first attempt. Sometimes you're like, well, I feel we're not exactly clicking with this particular person. There's no shame in that. Again, you can move on. You can take your time and find another person. Therapy should help. If you are feeling worse after therapy, that is not working. It could happen. Of course, you could have certain setbacks and difficult feelings, but in general, from my experience, you need to feel supported. If you feel like your therapist has your back and is not judging you and is accepting you, whatever you tell them, this is the right therapist. If your therapist is, trying to express themselves or like yawning, like that happened with me to that young therapist that just graduated from college, like this is not the right person for you. Number 2 thing that I want to recommend is to take a break from creating. I know it sounds, expected. You probably have heard this piece of advice, but again, it's definitely important because we often have FOMO, fear of missing out. We can't stop even for a day or for a week. I still have this giant fear that if I stop, it's the end of the world, because social media, they tell you like you need to keep posting, the algorithm is important, you need to be consistent. You are more than, your Instagram, you are more than the algorithm. Your life matters. You are more than your designs, more than your artwork. You are a person, you are a human being. You need to have a life, not just work. Work is a part of you, just a small part. Sometimes, I think several years ago, I wasn't even creating designs, or like I wasn't even an artist at some point, and now I'm stressing about this so much as if my life depends on it. I know it's important, of course. Artwork, it's your self-expression, it's your work. I totally feel it, I can totally relate to it, but you are more than your artwork. You are beyond, your creation, your designs, and so on. So sometimes it's important to take a break, to step away, and I will be giving you other points, recommendations. What can you do while you are taking a break from your artwork? Number 3 is actually contrary to what I had just said. Sometimes you do need a break, but sometimes you need to actually gently force yourself to keep creating, and only you know what works best for you at this moment. Don't force it. If you feel like you do have some energy to create, you can try such things as, for example, switching up your medium or task. If you decided that you don't need to take a break, you would rather keep creating. I think I gave this example in one of my previous videos once, and it's a big one for me. It works really well. I usually have like a running list of things that I'm working on. And of course, there are priorities. There are like number 1, number 2, number 3 thing that has to be done. And then there are other things at the end of the list which are like kind of less important, less urgent. And very often the most important things are the most complicated ones. And there are days when you're just so stuck on something. You have this anxiety on starting a big project. For example, building a website is a giant project. Like building a portfolio website, you need to, select your artwork. You need to realize how you want to arrange it. You need to decide, which provider you're going to use for your website. It's a giant piece of work. It takes, months to do. And if you feel like you're completely burned out and stuck and you can't start working on this project, do something else on your list. Maybe, somewhere at the end of my list is like create new recolors from existing designs. This is quick, this is relatively easy. And if you think you don't feel like developing the website today at no cost at all, like there's no way, just create some recolors from your existing designs. It is still something valuable for your, business, for your artwork. But, if day by day you are shying away from the important work, it's important to separate the big scary project into smaller steps. And if you take those small actionable steps, it's so much easier then. I know sometimes projects are overwhelming and giant and scary. So what you need to do is write down the exact steps that need to be done. For example, research website providers, look into Squarespace and Wix and something else. Then select artwork to add to portfolio, but that would probably go like later on the list. Think, which folders do you want to have on your website. Select existing artwork already. Think what is missing. Maybe you need to create new artwork. So it's just an example, again, giant project. It needs to be narrowed down into smaller steps. And I also mentioned, switching up your medium. That can work too. For example, if I don't feel like painting in watercolor for some time, I will work, on my vector designs and then go back to watercolor again. It depends, on how you work. Some people only work in one medium, but there are always different steps that you can switch. Number 4 point that I recommend is playing with art materials just for the sake of putting paint to paper or, scribbling on your iPad without creating a masterpiece, maybe without even having a plan in mind. If I feel really stuck creatively, sometimes I start doing like watercolor washes, maybe a rainbow wash or just a tonal teal beautiful wash, or, create textures as well. Textures can be used later on in your designs. You can scan them, put them in repeat and add like a burlap texture, or maybe you feel like painting a realistic wood texture. So things like that. It's not the rocket science. It's just something, almost mindless, very easy. Or take like brush markers and create flower shapes. And you would be surprised. Sometimes when you turn off your logical part of the brain, you are just mindlessly painting and painting and painting without putting this pressure of creating something valuable. Eventually something interesting will start coming out, from under your brush. And number 5 kind of connects to the previous one, is draw mindlessly with watching a movie or listening to a podcast. Doodle in your notebook. Like I said, take your favorite brush markers, or there are different like crayons and whatnot, color pencils, pull them out, see what happens. Like what happens if you mix color pencils with watercolor? What if you use like stamps to create some interesting new motifs? This all engages creative play, and it's very important. Number 6 point is read self-help books or books about other creatives. Examples of such books can be, those that I reviewed in my list. The bookshelf, for example, the book about scanner personality, or the book about highly sensitive people, or, Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, or the book called The War of Art. I will include pictures here. If you have Amazon Prime, there is usually a possibility to download free samples of every book. Even if you don't have this full subscription for Kindle books, you can download a free sample. So you can, it goes to my iPad usually, and you can read like 20 pages of the book and see if you actually like it. If I like the book, I, might buy it, or I usually just borrow it from the library. And if I really, really like the book, usually then I buy it, and, those are the books that I review in my videos as well. Or reading about other creatives, or, sometimes watching movies about other creatives, like musicians, artists, or fashion designers. I mention it all the time, that we creatives are connected on so many levels. You might be a woodworker, but you probably face a lot of the same challenges as artists or, dancers. This famous book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. Julia Cameron is a choreographer. So all of her work is about choreography, and I think about writing as well. And, writers and artists also have a lot in common. Number 7 point I recommend is watching self-help videos or maybe listening to podcasts. I think maybe it's a little bit stupid, but I mentioned it once that if I have a problem, I Google it and I look for what are people saying, in blogs or in videos. It's your preferable method of, I don't really like podcasts that much, but I like YouTube videos a lot. So what I do is, whatever problem I'm facing, I'll type in, for example, why are my designs not selling, something like that. Again, totally random example. And you kind of have to look fast through the information that comes up. If it's a YouTube video or even Burnout, I actually Googled this. I was like, how to handle creative burnout. And I watched a couple videos on double speed. I normally don't do that, before creating my own videos, but I was like, what if I missed something? What if there are any cool ideas? So that's where I heard that phrase that I mentioned in the beginning of the video, if you burn bright, you will burn out eventually. So what I was gonna say, listening to those videos, they annoy me a lot because very often it's the same things, over and over again, and perhaps I am repeating some of them as well, but you are looking for some fresh ideas. And I think honestly nothing is new under the sun. We just recycle information, we all have the same ideas for centuries, but sometimes you hear it explained in a new way, or an artist will have this particular word that touches your soul, and maybe another person will listen to the same video or podcast and they will be like, well, whatever, but for you, it will touch your heart and it will be like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Number 8 point that I recommend and that I very often use is taking a hike or a very long walk. Apparently I call it walking, but I realized that for Americans it's already hiking. When you are walking for 2 hours in the countryside, this is hiking. So it's a whole topic about walking in America. Maybe you've seen those TikToks where people are like, nobody walks in America, it's scary, the police officer will stop you and ask you why are you walking? That is not true. I heard that it's like that in San Francisco, but in Boston where I live, people still do walk, they still do go for walks, okay? But if you want more on that, I can make a separate video about lifestyle and things like that. But what I was gonna say, so I work from home, I'm a freelancer, so I'm very often at home by myself, stuck in my thoughts, creating things online. And when I get overwhelmed, when my anxiety is, through the roof, I go for a long walk, sometimes even in the rain. And there's a point in that in particular, because it makes you fight the elements. And as you walk, at first you walk for, I don't know, start with maybe 30 minutes at first, you walk in one direction and you get somewhere. I think to myself, this is my route for today, I will go, to that street, and I know it will take me an hour to get there. And then you need an hour to go back, of course, right? And especially when it's raining a little bit, of course you need to wear proper clothing and boots and have an umbrella and be prepared for the weather. Very important. And then as you're walking back, I promise you, you will be so tired. At first, you're starting to walk and you're like, oh my God, my life is miserable, all these problems, all this anxiety. And after about 10-15 minutes, it starts getting better. Your thoughts kind of clear out, see some kind of clarity, you see some new ideas. And I promise you, it's after 1 hour walking, your anxiety will be completely gone and you'll be walking oh my God, I'm so cold, I want to go home, or I'm sweating, or this rain is bugging me, I really want to go home and eat a good meal, have hot cocoa. So you will start thinking about these mundane things. They will kind of bring you back to reality, out of your anxiety, out of your intrusive thoughts. So try that. Number 9 tip is actually also very helpful. Doing some housework, things like decluttering, cleanup, actually clears up your mind as well. I think it has been proven already scientifically that doing the housework, washing the dishes, doing things with your hands in general clears up your mind really well. And I noticed too, as I get stressed out, I have difficult weeks, difficult months, things start piling up in my studio. All of the tables are like cluttered with brushes and things like this that I often buy, inspiration, fabrics, and handkerchiefs and greeting cards. These are bookmarks from Japan that my coworker brought, stickers and stuff like that. So here I organize it nicely for you guys. But then if you look beyond the camera, you will see, like, I'm looking at my desk now and there are magazines to be categorized. I need to look at the photos, whether I want to use anything from the photos for inspiration. There are new perfumes that I buy a lot of because scents inspire me. I even did fragrance illustrations at some point and I'm thinking of doing more. What else? There are different trinkets. My husband and I kind of got into thrifting recently, so we started going to antique stores. So I will buy like a little figurine, a little porcelain pig or something like that. So when you don't feel like creating, when you are stuck, this is a very good time to take care of those things. As you clear out your desk in the studio or wherever you're creating, your mind will be clearing together. It's also very cathartic, to throw stuff away, to recycle it. I do try to throw things away responsibly, recycle whatever I have. I have a paper bag in my studio always for, recycling stuff. And also plastic bags I recycle separately. But the thing is, when you get rid of old stuff, when you like tear up some papers and you toss things away, it makes you happier. It's like this healthy aggression, you are being aggressive in a good way, like you're not hurting anybody, but you are releasing this bad energy, you are releasing the difficult emotions. Also, if you have a lot of clothing like I do, I try to sell it, or donate it. And again, it's a big task, it takes time to do it. So whenever you are burned out from creating, this is a good time, maybe to go through your closet and get rid of the things that you do not want anymore. Tip number 10 is taking a day trip, or I think Julia Cameron in that book calls it the artist date or the creative date or something like that. So it's planning something nice that you like doing. It can be such things as going to a museum or a botanical garden, to your favorite coffee shop, a library, or a spa. You can pamper yourself with food, go to your favorite restaurant or a cafe. You can buy a gift for yourself or for someone else. You can go shopping. So something that you really enjoy, but it has to be, getting out of the house, going somewhere, traveling somewhere. It could also be, something like getting a massage or a pedicure or a manicure or whatever makes your heart sing. So I normally, this year was difficult for me, and the previous year was even more difficult. But normally, when I'm not super stressed out, when I'm in my normal working state, I try to go somewhere every month. It can be things like a botanical garden, or earlier this year I went to a camellia greenhouse. So I saw camellias blooming in February. So this is just something that I enjoy. I like plants, I like flowers. So even going to a florist shop, getting a bouquet for yourself. I also buy myself flowers all the time. There is a bouquet standing right in front of me. So just make yourself happy. Don't wait for someone to do it for you. Just do it yourself. Number 11 point is picking up a new hobby that requires research and new setup. So it can be something like, a dancing class, and you're like, oh, I need, dancing clothes, and I need to research the dancing shoes. Or like my husband took a welding class at a local community college, so he wanted to work on his cars. So he was like, I really could use some welding knowledge. So he did that. I recently started painting in oil, even though I'm everywhere, my social media, my business cards say I'm a watercolor artist. And there is this certain tension between watercolor and oil always. It's like watercolor is not taken very seriously. I learned it again this year. I went to an oil painting workshop, and the oil painters were saying that, the galleries don't want watercolors because they have to be under the glass and you can't transport it. So people kind of look down on watercolor. And, as a watercolor artist, it has been hurting me all along. And I used to be like, I'm not painting in oil out of principle. But then, the peer pressure, and you're like, well, if people want to buy oil paintings, you have to give it to them, right? Again, I'm not really actively selling my paintings at the moment, but I'm always open for it. And you know, when there is something, I do enjoy painting, and I have tried pretty much all the mediums except for oil. So I was like, well, you know, I definitely want to try it out and see how it feels. So I signed up for an oil painting workshop in New Hampshire very late. It was like only a month before. Usually I know that I'm going somewhere at least 6 months before. And this time, you know, I thought I wouldn't go because, you know, I started my part-time job in April, and it was very difficult for me physically and mentally, combining it with, you know, pattern talent. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted, I'm not going anywhere. But then, you know, I remembered that I need to give myself joy from time to time, and I do like plein air, and I do like workshops, and they do bring me joy, and they do reignite my passion for creativity. So I was like, why don't I go? And I saw not an ad, but like a post by a local artist that he's doing a workshop in the mountains. I was like, this is perfect, so I'll go. And I started researching, you know, all the oil supplies, because I don't have anything. Like, you need different brushes, you need the paints themselves, the pigments, you need a different easel for plein air, not the same as watercolor. And well, oil painting turned out to be a very, very expensive hobby. I was shocked. I bought a lot of supplies, not right away. It was like in waves, you know, as I, you know, got some money, I would like buy something. And then I asked my husband to help, because I basically spent almost like $1,000 on supplies, which is absolutely insane. The easel cost like around $300. The, what is that called? Gosh, tripod. The tripod was like $200. A tube of oil paint is at least $10, and usually it's more like $15. And you need, you know, like 10 colors or more. Brushes cost money. So, well, that was not what I wanted to say, but all those thoughts about planning the process, buying the supplies, reading up on them, research, definitely took me out of my slumber state and the extreme burnout that I was facing. So that definitely gave me more energy, and not even just buying stuff. You know, when I started painting in oil, like, I know the principles of painting, but oil is a different medium. You don't use water with it. You use, you know, turpentine or different mediums like alkyd, and I had no idea about those things. And also, you know, I learned painting very long ago, like as a teenager, so things have changed and chemistry is developing all the time. So I had to look up all those things and read on them. Also, the workshop I was taking was led by 3 artists. There was 3 days, so one day it was new artists, and you know, on the first day the artist was like, use alkyd medium, you know, so it dries faster. Or no, sorry, it was liquid it's called. And then the artist that did it the second day, he was like, I never use liquid, I use oil, like use linseed oil to dilute your paints. I was like, okay, this is, you know, I was told yesterday to use liquid. The third day, the third artist, they were all friends, like they were traveling together. He's like, well, I don't use either, actually. I don't use liquid and don't use oil. Why don't you try just using your oil paints and just, you know, mixing them together, maybe with a little bit of turpentine, like just a drop of it. So, you know, all those details, you know, they make your brain work in new ways, and you are learning and you are gaining more energy by learning these new things, maybe even if they are not related to your main job. And I think sometimes it's even better if it's not directly related to your job, because you switch up, you know, your gears, and you know, your brain gets working in a different way. Or I briefly mentioned as well that I modeled for 2 years. That was like an entirely new career, and I had to do a lot of research, and I arranged photo shoots myself because I didn't have a portfolio. So I was looking, you know, in local Facebook groups. I was looking for photographers that do what is called TFP, which is time for print, and it basically means that the model and the photographer don't pay each other, they pay each other with their time. So that was taking a lot of my time and a lot of my energy as well. But it did bring in, you know, some new stuff into my life for sure. Number 12 is a very important and very useful tip that works really, really well for handling burnout. It's looking over your past designs and revamping portfolio. This has helped me several times, you guys. When you start looking at what you did previously, all the hard work you have put in, all the good designs that you have done. It kind of reminds you who you are, you know. Sometimes I look at my website and I'm like, oh my God, I did this. I did this. And now I'm just sitting here sad, not creating anything new. You know, as you look at your best designs, and your portfolio on the website should reflect your best designs. Don't put all of your designs there. It will remind you, of the emotional connections you had with those designs. It will remind you what you were feeling when you were creating them. It will remind you of certain success points. Maybe you won a challenge at some point, or maybe you had an interesting branding deal. Maybe you worked for a cool company. So look at your past designs, look at your portfolio, take something out of your portfolio, because if you haven't looked at it for a while, I can almost guarantee that you will look at certain designs and be like, well, these have to go now. I have better designs, so I have to replace them. So you can spend your time like that. It's double use. You are reigniting your creative flame and you are revamping your portfolio, which we also need to do from time to time. Number 13, I kind of mentioned already, would be taking a class or a workshop. So I feel like I just spoke about workshops, and it's always a little adventure. I take painting workshops for a variety of reasons, and those reasons are all important to me. So I choose them by different criteria. I try to do one painting workshop a year, and it has to be an interesting destination, ideally where I haven't gone before. So I think of what kind of landscapes we'll be painting. For example, if I went to Maine and we were painting the coast, the following year I don't want to paint the coast again. I'd rather paint the forest or something like that. It has to be a teacher whose style I like and from whom I want to learn. And I don't want to be too close to home. I want it to be like a little journey. I usually go alone, so there will be like a group of artists there. I don't go with my family. It's like me time. For me, it's very important. So you could also, maybe take a class on Skillshare. I have a class on Skillshare, by the way. So again, learning something new definitely reignites your passion for creation. But there is a catch here. Sometimes people get stuck taking classes and they just become perennial students. So please don't do that. There is always a time to stop. If you are only taking classes and not doing anything, maybe you need to reconsider. But as a creative challenge, as a change in your rhythm, I think taking classes and workshops is great. Number 14 is kind of a similar point to the portfolio one. Teach someone or talk about your work. When you are explaining to someone what you do, what you are, you kind of remember the newness of it when you just started out, when you were so passionate about it. You can also make a video about it on YouTube, or make a fake interview if you would like. So imagine you are explaining to someone who you are, and you have to choose simple terms so people can understand, what your job is. I have a video where I talk about my job. If you haven't seen it, you might want to watch it. So I started working with a new therapist, and I had to talk about myself, and I was like, I'm this and that, I'm a designer, I have a YouTube channel. And sometimes we forget that we do all these things. And I listened to myself like from a distance kind of, and I was like, wow, I have a very cool life. I have a very cool job. Nevertheless, I burned out, and yes, that happens, but it's good to remember sometimes all the blessings that you have. Number 15 advice that I would give is to accept life seasons. And what that means is that, sometimes in life we have summer when everything is bursting with blossoms and it's very fruitful and beautiful, and you are creating a lot of artwork and you are outgoing and happy. But then we also have winter sometimes when we are not creating as much, perhaps. We are more contemplating on our life, creative journey. And maybe it is the time to rework some old artwork, because I don't know about you, I have a lot of motifs that have not been put in repeat, or I have some old designs that can be reworked and made better because I made them early in my journey and they're not quite there yet. And at the time I didn't see it because I didn't have enough experience, but I have it now. And maybe now is the time in your life to write a blog about your creative journey. Maybe you are not creating the designs themselves, but you are actually doing something else. Maybe you are developing your course or something like that. Number 16 piece of advice is start a list of what helped you before. I think it's also a very important point because, like I mentioned, I do get into a crisis quite regularly. I know it will happen again, but I swear every single time it hurts like it's the first time. And I'm very scared that, I will stop drawing, I will start making artwork, I am forever burned out. And, I did have a period where I didn't make any art for almost 10 years. And I think that's one of my phobias now, to stop creating. So as this was happening, I was like, here we go again. And I started a list of useful ideas. And a lot of the things that I'm telling you in this video are from that list. There were like specific books that really helped me, like the War of Art book, or some videos on YouTube where, like recently I found a Russian artist who paints and talks. His paintings are good, but I'm mostly interested in him talking about his impressions, his struggles as he, paints and tries to sell it online. So I would like to encourage more people to talk about their journey. I think that's what my channel is about. Like, I'm a little bit different. I know I could make videos about like how to make a good textile design portfolio, but I know there are already good videos like that out there. But nobody talks about like internal struggles, like what do you feel, what do you do when you have no clients, or when there's no work or your designs are not selling. And I want to talk about this. I want to feel that I'm not alone. So start a list of things that helped you before, and next time you are stuck, you're like, okay, here's my list, and you go by the list, and sometimes things don't work, and other times things will really actually help you because they helped you before. Number 17 is a point which, I got from the book that I recently reviewed. I hope this video will already be posted on YouTube. It's about highly sensitive people. And the author, the psychologist there, Elaine, said that, if you feel like you're often stuck, you have anxiety, or, you are depressed, or you are struggling otherwise, you need to find time to do some creative play. And I also actually realized the same thing independently before I read the book, is that I often go out of crisis through playing, through a game. Like I make up my own games, something silly, something that will make you giggly and like giddy and funny, and you'll be like, don't be afraid to get stupid. I'll explain what I mean by that. One year I was really focused on like finding my art style, and I have a video about finding your art style as well. And I was like so determined to sit down and write down and reveal, what my art style is. So I started like spinning wheels, and then I was writing down like what topics do I turn to, what mediums do I use, what is important for me. And I came up with this model of what I call the Mexican food bowl. If you go to places like Chipotle or Qdoba, is it Qdoba? Where you go in and they say, what are you getting? And you say, I'm getting a bowl or like a wrap, right? And I always get a bowl, and I always get rice, like brown rice or white rice. And for me, that would be, hand painting my designs. Then like beans, I might not or might have beans, so that would be, I don't know, like watercolor or something like that, or like a storyline maybe, like I have some designs that are not purely decorative, but designs that are inspired by like legends. So that would be my beans in the Mexican food bowl. I hope you know what I mean. And then like I always get chicken. Like chicken is absolutely essential. 100% times I get the Mexican bowl, I get chicken. So my chicken would be flowers. Like I always put flowers or botanicals anywhere. And I'm kind of making it up now as I go, but I was so excited about this idea. It was like so fun. I didn't actually follow this model anymore. It's like somewhere in my notebook, but it just kind of elevated me and made me so happy. And I was like, I actually know who I am as an artist. Also, another form of creative play could be using prompt books, books that tell you like what to draw. I actually happen to have one right here. I'll show you. So see, it's called The Sketchbook Idea Generator by Jennifer Orkin Lewis. And here, see, it's like cut in 3 pieces. And if you do this, it will give you which topic you can use, which medium, right? So an abandoned castle in gouache and in this color palette. And it's a cool, fun book, and actually I bought it, but I never used it. But still, it ignites my creativity, and I was like, this is so fun. And there are also books like 100 questions about me. I don't have it on hand, but I will try to include some pages here, and it will be a list of questions, or like, my favorite movie is this and that. Well, what is your view on terminal punishment? And there will be like very serious questions and very silly questions, and it just kind of fills you up with this self-love, because you are writing about yourself. It's like you're giving somebody an interview. You reinforce that you are important, you have opinions. So I think it's kind of a creative game, and you can have all sorts of your own games to play, but creative play is very, very important. So, as I promised, the 3 tips that annoy me but they work too. So number 18 is exercise. I'll explain why I put these points at the end, and why they annoy me. And exercise definitely is very, very important. And it would be surprising. Sometimes you think, oh my goodness, I'm so burned out, I'm so exhausted, I have no energy to go to the gym or to go for a run. But if you kind of force yourself to go to the gym, 99% after the workout, I feel better. My mind is clear, my body feels great. But getting to the gym is extremely difficult, when I'm burned out and stressed out. Of course, I don't mean, if you didn't sleep for 3 nights and you are working 40 hours, I don't know, a day, which is impossible. So if you are overworking, of course, don't, force yourself to go to the gym. But if you feel like in general, you don't move enough and you could definitely use some exercise, then go for it. I've read a study that said very often we feel tired, like our mind is tired, but our body is actually ready to go. And it feels like when you are tired emotionally and mentally, like your body is tired too, but that is not true. And actually, if you have had a lot of burden on your mind, maybe you watched a lot of movies, or you were working on the computer for a long time, like your mind was already overwhelmed, but your body didn't get enough exercise. So now you are spinning your wheels, with all the anxiety and overwhelm, and you actually need to let it out through body, through movement. So yes, exercise is very important. Find your exercise of choice. I will always advocate for exercising. I can't stress it enough. I am a very devoted weightlifter. I have been lifting weights for around 10 years. And I'm not saying, I live at the gym. Yes, I do have years when I only go to the gym like once a week or twice a week. And I have had years when I worked out like crazy. But healthy balance is what I'm striving for. And you can always find, exercise that works for you. Worst case scenario, not quite what I meant, but like you can always go for a walk, right? Almost anybody can walk. It's easy, it's accessible. It's one of the reasons I like it, is because you don't need anything. Like put your shoes on and go outside and just walk, walk downtown, look at the lights, the Christmas lights on the houses, breathe fresh air, look at the trees, look around, look at the clouds. And that's also exercise. Number 19 point is meditation. And again, it's a big important topic, and I'm not a big fan of meditation. I have trouble kind of, sitting and focusing on something slow and mindful, because I'm like more of a go-getter and I want to get, use out of my time spent. But I know meditation is very helpful. Spoke about it a little bit in the video about highly sensitive people, and there are so many different ways to meditate, and there are videos, podcasts and whatnot, and apps for meditation. And number 20 point is being in nature, being outside. And again, I put it last because it's like such a sappy, boring piece of advice, I think. But it's also because I live in the suburbs and I walk outside almost every single day, sometimes even several times a day. And it's just not something that will like shake up my system and, take me out of the burnout. But I understand not everybody lives in the same circumstances as me. So being in connection with nature is very important, especially if you live in the concrete jungle in the city. If you can be somewhere near a lake, near water, look at the river, be in a little forest that's maybe near your area where you live. it definitely does recharge us, especially creatives, especially artists. What does not help with creative burnout? Pushing yourself beyond your limits, because if you are overusing your own energy, you will run out eventually. It is important to know your rhythm and take breaks, take days off, and handling your fatigue, frustration, or other feelings that come along the way. A word on the situation when you feel like you have burned out creatively, but you still have to keep on creating if you have some obligations. What I have been speaking about above kind of implies that you have the luxury of stepping away from your work for a while. But what if you are, for example, working with freelance customers, doing custom work, and so on? In this case, I would still strongly suggest taking a break, a vacation if you can. Sometimes just being a week away from work recharges you and things already don't look so scary and annoying. Also, it's important to dissociate from work, which means separate your identity from designs you work on. I previously got into this trap all the time. I basically equated my work with my entire personality, which is a big mistake. I thought when I cranked out complex designs and bestsellers, I was a good person. And when, for example, working in-house, there was occasionally a design which I just couldn't crack and my manager kept asking for revisions, for instance, in terms of color. And she kept saying, this is not it, let's try again, let's revise it again, let's make the colors a little dustier, then a little cleaner, and maybe bring in a random color. And I felt terrible because I felt I was failing at my job. But there are many variables here that came to play. First of all, when you are fulfilling somebody else's thoughts, there's a lot of room for error. Maybe the communication isn't that great. Maybe the person giving you directions isn't quite qualified to talk about design. That can happen too. And many other different things. But even if it's your fault and you are failing at something, it doesn't void your entire personality. Sometimes I think there were times when I wasn't even a designer yet. I was a teacher or a student. Also, beyond my work life, I am somebody. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, sister, friend. I'm a person with other talents and interests. Being an artist and designer is only a part of my personality. So it's very important to separate yourself from work. Also, as I was recently watching other videos on YouTube about burnout, there was a psychologist who said, to prevent burnout, there needs to be a very clear distinction between work and rest. And I realized that I don't have it anymore. When I first quit my corporate job and started freelancing, I did make effort to not work on weekends. I wore different clothes during the day, pretending that I go to work. But gradually I stopped doing these things. I mentioned in my recent videos that this year I got a part-time job at a botanical garden, gift and plant shop, and my schedule there was Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. I also worked on Fridays at first, but then I gave them up. So I was working on Pattern Talent, my design business, on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And Saturdays I usually did the grocery shopping, cooking, laundry, and cleaning. Working on Sundays messes up your brain schedule, so to say, because your mind no longer has this distinction of weekends. For me, Sundays were the busiest days at work because that's when people go to the botanical garden, and also holidays such as Mother's Day and Father's Day fall on Sundays. So it's extremely important to have some kind of set working schedule, and I'm working on getting back on track now that my seasonal job is over until spring. So I mentioned taking a break, but if you feel like a vacation after vacation, year after year, you get better for some time, but then still feel unhappy and unmotivated and burned out, it's time to think what needs to be changed in the long run, because apparently something is not working. It could be a new job, a new direction in surface pattern design, or whatever your field is, and it's not an easy process, but you need to start thinking what your goals and wishes are and how you can gradually transition to a new life. Maybe not. So my first education is in languages. I graduated from college in Belarus, from university, and I became an English and German teacher. But when we moved, and I worked as a translator in Belarus at a shoe factory, and I also taught English to the people working, for the company so they could travel abroad. and communicate at the trade shows, at the airport, at the hotels, and so on. But when we moved to the United States, I tried getting some translator work. It wasn't working out. My daughter was very little, and I eventually landed a front desk job at a dental office. And, it was fun at first. It was kind of cute. It was in Boston. I took the train. I was still so excited about Boston, the big city. But then, I started realizing with time that it's not up to my potential. I thought I could do better. And I started burning out, actually, because, I didn't like the job. I was like, what's next? What is next? There was no career growth there. And I was kind of trapped in those credentials that I had, because the only, I was applying for interviews, and the only companies that responded were like dental and medical offices, because my resume said, that I work at a dental office. So, getting out of the dental office, I found a job in logistics, which was like completely out of my reach. It was definitely not for me. I struggled a lot with that job. I worked there for 2 weeks and then I quit. I actually went to lunch and I never came back. And this is one of the most outrageous things that I did in my entire life. It was just a sign that I was extremely burned out. I was extremely unhappy, and I was like, I can't do this. And, I came home and I told my husband, I quit and I need to rest because I'm completely exhausted and I need some time and I need a moment, and then I will start looking for a job. At that time, I haven't decided yet that I will go to study textile design. But, I was thinking, what is next? What do I do? One of the scariest times in my life. So I stayed home. My husband was extremely unhappy that I quit the job, in logistics. And, he wasn't comfortable with the idea that I didn't have a job. So he found me a job. He himself found another dental office, which is 5 minutes away from where we lived, walking. And I worked there for 2 months, and that was the worst job in my entire life. It's just that particular office had a very strange management system. They were using, what is that called? What does Tom Cruise do for a religion? I forgot, what is it called? So they were using that management system. It was very, very strict. They were watching us on cameras all the time. So at the moment I was already going crazy. I had just left 2 jobs. And again, I was going to interviews and people would only hire me to other dental offices. And I'm like, am I done? I'm not even 30 years old and I'm stuck in dental offices. So this is a crucial, critical time in life when you need to make some creative decisions, but also very important decisions. I have a family, I have a child, so I couldn't just quit and stay home. So I was very stressed at the time. So while working at that second dental office, I was, thinking what do I do next? What do I do next? And I kind of simultaneously got 2 ideas. One was that I should go back to college. I should, switch a profession. I thought, I should learn to do something here in the United States so that I have some kind of educational credentials here, because I did have a lot of education from Belarus, but here people very often have never even heard of this country, so it's like nothing. So I started thinking, what do I do? Where do I go? And it's very scary. Again, it's not an overnight thing. It took me several months. So the first idea was that I go back to some kind of college, and I was thinking, becoming a hairdresser or something like that, because I couldn't go to university for another 5 years. It's very expensive. I didn't have the time. I was already, a grown woman with a child and a family. And the second idea was that meanwhile, while I am looking into studying, I should go back to teaching. And I did that, and I found a job very easily, actually. And I taught English, I think for 3 years. I taught at a school for adult immigrants. It was a terrific time, it was stressful in its own way, but I have met a lot of great students. And, I taught customer service as well. They made me teach it because I had experience. I worked at those freaking dental offices. And, I was gradually transitioning. I was working as a teacher. I was working also Saturdays and Sundays. And I think that was like Wednesday or something. And 2 times a week, I was driving down to New Bedford, Massachusetts, where my college was located. And that was an interesting time. It was not easy, you know, but I was taking those gradual steps to a new dream. If you want to know why I chose specifically textile design, you can watch that interview video, which is called 20 something questions to a textile designer. I tell that story there. But then again, you know, I went to college for textile design. It wasn't the end of the story. Then I got the corporate design job and internship, and then my design job of 4 years, and again I burned out, and again I wasn't happy, and I just keep moving on with life. And I think now it's been 3.5 years since I quit my corporate job, and I am burned out again. I am in crisis again, because, you know, freelancing and small business is not for the faint of heart. So, well, we'll see, you know, where life takes me next. I'm still planning on doing textile design and artwork for sure. I am considering different options. I'm thinking, you know, whether I want to concentrate more on painting. I have always been thinking about illustration, but to be completely honest with you, I don't know yet where I will go. I will be teaching textile design classes. I will be talking about textile design on my channel, but if you have other requests for other topics non-related to textile design, please leave them in the comments. I do feel like I kind of put myself in this box of like a textile designer, but the thing is, I am very passionate about textile design. I do like it very much. I do like designing patterns, but it's not all, you know. I'm more than that. I am an artist, and I like other things as well. In conclusion, I would like to say that burnout is not the end of the world. Life still goes on, and you are still you. All the great things you possess are still with you, your talents, your interests, but burnout is definitely a sign that there is a need for change. Crisis points are always points of growth. So I know it can be so hard, but please know that you are not alone and you've got this. Share your ways of handling burnout in the comments, and if you've enjoyed this video, I would appreciate your little like. It's a free way of saying thank you. And don't forget to subscribe, share this video with your art buddies, check out my Skillshare classes, and remember, patterns are everywhere.